forecasts daily thermal accumulation following biological parameters for each pest. The early warning system, SAT, is inside each of the fields, and it allows to locate the site, the same species, variety, and management, and additional monitoring points. It also creates forecasts for 8 days. It sends alerts or warnings and helps control chemicals and also send notices of application. The diagnostic system is where users may find a series of information for better management of their crop, following the 3 pillars of integrated pest management: monitoring, prevention, and control by interacting through queries in the system, structured in a simple language, which can be responded through different menus. Now, if we go into the early warning system itself, it uses different types of data to create its phenological models. There are research projects that are specific for each of the phenological models. Here we see an example of the project that was presented by Dr. Kurkovich in the second panel of this series. With this type of project, you need a biological study in the laboratory with different weather chambers, and 9 to 12 generally at different temperatures. You also need micrometeorology studies by adding different depths of the canopy sensors in each of the fields to verify influences within the forest canopy, temperature, and also the relationship with the external environment and measurements at the weather station. This is to find any correction indices. Then there's work on nonlinear models to have phenological models and thermal thresholds, and then we establish monitoring stations where you follow the development of the pests to later analyze and calibrate the models. We are using many different models today, nonlinear models. And those that we use in Chile include those highlighted that are used in the different projects. Of the models, we see which ones are best adapted to the situation and which refer to the different chambers and temperatures we have recorded. Then once we determine the minimum and maximum temperatures, we work with the monitoring station data, with the phenological models for adults and immature stages. Here we can see the models for egg hatching, larvae, and pupae. So that's an example of for Lobesia utrana. Then we have information from these studies that is loaded into the system to have a systematization of the warnings. There's a dashboard where you load the new models, and you have to add the degree day thresholds, the cumulative degree days from the beginning to the next control. The starter beginning is the chronofix, which is 1st of July for our hemisphere, up to another date where we have the degree days with the egg control. This is where we tell producers that they're about to have that control. The same for the start of larvae control, end of control, and this is again Lobesia butrana. this case that we see on screen, also for pupae control, but for other bugs, we would have some information on nymphs loaded as well. Now we have per generation and development stage. We see the models that have been loaded, which is what we have over here. This is loaded over here, and then for the different generations and different stages, once we have all the models uploaded, there's a calculation of tables telling us the cumulative degree days for each stage and the percentage of progress of these curves, which are normalized. Here we see the temperatures as well. We program the cumulative degree days. So you name the model, you choose the calculation. It can be continuous method or maximum minimum. And then you have base temperature or the lower threshold, the cutoff method, the minimum maximum. Then you can have the method horizontal and vertical, and you record. This runs about 1 week or 10 days, depending on the dates. It starts calculating on July 1st, and it runs until the current date. So, for example, in February and March, it took about 1 week to 10 days to complete all cumulative degree day calculations from the 1st of July to date. We'll show you an outline to see how it calculates. The agri-weather report modeling system has data from the different stations in the country, and original data as they come in, and organized or sorted data. Then we have a tool to calculate with the data of that weather station the cumulative degree days for different thresholds, minimum and maximum temperature, and cutoff method as necessary. You can use bibliographical information if there's no model in the system. There's also access to all data from weather stations throughout the country, and you can choose the dates you want to show on screen and calculate. And also, all of these can be downloaded as information in Excel sheets for producers. Then we have another interface of the agri-weather system with maps. The yellow dots are weather stations. This is showing the coverage and the calculation errors. Green is the ideal area for modeling with 0 to 0.5 errors. Orange or amber is 0 to 0.75, and red is 0.75 to less than 1 degree. Ideally, we'd only work on the green areas, but there are not many weather stations in certain regions. There's not much density. In the region of O'Higgins, where we have much of our fruit production, we should have 160 weather stations, but given the characteristics of our country with very closed valleys and high mountains, we should have 160, and we have between 55 to 60. So that's why we allow for some modeling to happen outside green areas to have greater coverage and to give our growers knowledge of where they're located and the level of error they might be having in that region. That way, producers could, for example, come together and buy a weather station to be part of another network. Now, what we have here is different models under the weather modeling module with different coverage maps. There's one general map for temperatures calculated every 15 minutes. There's a map for cumulative degree days, which is programmed in the portal. There's a relative humidity map, 48 times, and then the light hours map, daylight hours. Then there's a new module for satellite and the weather modeling. It's at the very first stage of integrating our independent weather stations. The coverage areas where we have thermal or temperature maps, which are done at the weather stations, and the MODIS images, which are downloaded to cover the whole country twice a day. These are the two passes it does to cover the whole territory. Just a second, sorry.
Entonces, dentro de este módulo se desarrolla un mapa.
As part of this module, we have the daily temperatures, minimum and maximum. It has a resolution of 90 meters. There's also an evapotranspiration map as reference with millimeters per day at a resolution of 90 by 90 meters. This is because we are also helping with an irrigation project, so this new module includes this information. 2 other institutions and universities working in that sense. And we provide it as a map for producers. We also have a daily NDVI map. It's 250 meters. And there's a daily cumulative degree days map that has a base of 10 and cutoff of 30, and it's at 90 meters. The warning system has 3 modules. One for acquisition and modeling with automatic daily processes that creates validated databases and spatializes temperature and relative humidity and creates a database with raster maps for temperature and relative humidity and cumulative degree days. There's also a module for consultation and queries. It has automatic routines and updates RPF portals. So the idea is for producers' portals to be updated every night and start working through this module if they have questions, so that when they enter again, the system is ready and provides the information they had requested. So it updates the different portals. We have 3, answers queries and sends programmed warnings. And there's another module for administration and analysis. It evaluates the system itself, the data from the stations, to visualize maps and others. It works under a continuous temperature model with a simulation, and it's the areas of influence for each station with the climate data based on the algorithm of the minimum cost with variables of distance, slope, and sinuosity of the route. And here, for example, we have an illustration of the different routes from one weather station to one site. It operates with cost functions under the minimum cost route. And then there's a model to adjust temperature locally. Takes the data of height or altitude, slope, exposure, and vertical profile of wind. It has relative humidity, wind velocity, atmospheric pressure, and radiation. This information is used to extrapolate information on temperature from one station to one point. And this is the module where you load the different tools and models. Here we have a flow chart. As I said, we are connected to over 1,000 weather stations. There's daily updates, database, SAT Medio, that validates the information, receives the information at around 9 p.m. and starts a validation process and filling in any data gaps. Every station has base information like typical curves for relative humidity and others. This is part of a three-step or three-method series to validate and ensure we have complete data depending on the positions of the curve at extremes or whether increasing or decreasing. That validated database is used to then have the temperature models, the local temperature maps every 15 minutes. Then they are integrated and they then create the cumulative degree day models. There's also the phenological models or mathematics models of presence of the pests. So these models are run within these maps, and they have cumulative degree days pixel by pixel at 90 meters. And they give us a map of the current development of the pest. It can be percentage of presence, percentage of population, phytosanitary action, and there's a producer database where it sends the warnings. This all works with the interconvention servers in our private data centers that we rent with equipment to store it at the very high-end equipment. And so how does the system work? Here we have a summary. First, you program the warnings. For this, you have the polygons with the varieties under our registration system, or you can draw them yourself in the system and it would be loaded into the database. And you can also select specific points where you'd like to monitor. You might think, for example, a producer here is working already very well ahead of the pest or does not have good management and they could become risk points. So you can select that, the points you'd like to have followed up. Then once this polygon is recorded, it has to be within the coverage map, the one I showed you with 3 colors, according to the error levels. And if it is inside or within that area, it is recorded and you can follow up on the different forecasts per area, and it would send warnings via email. You could also program chemical controls and send out notices. This is how the system looks. This was taken on the 21st of March, yesterday. This figure only shows Lobesia Botrana, but we have others, Baglara, Hilarius, and others. And it gives producers for each day and for 8 days the percentage of progress for a certain type of egg, larva L1, larva L3, cumulative degree days projected into 8 days. And at the 8th day, when it's a time for control, and you can see it here, the phytosanitary action, active, start next control, control, eggs and larvae, control larvae nymphs, and inactive. So when we start the season, you would see this probably grayed out until the activation where it would come up green. And every day this would progress towards yellow, which is start next control. And when it's orange at the 8th day, then you would get the first alert warning you that you are at 8 days and that you should be preparing your chemical control. And the producer enters the system to ensure they can program their chemical application.
Bueno, esa es la parte, digamos, de la presentación que quería.
That's the part of the presentation that I wanted to show you. I'm not sure if we have time to look at the next section because I do not want to go over the agenda. The agenda is a lot of times. Thank you. Thank you, Roberto. We do thank you for your presentation. So we're now going to move on and hear our next speaker. Please be sure to send your questions in the chat. The next speaker is Mr. Keith Cressman. He's the senior officer for locust forecasting at the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. He's the main expert in FAO's desert locusts. He's been on the early warning system platform for the FAO and has been providing forecasting for more than 33 years for the different countries. He's established early warning systems for such as the boerworm and other pests. He began his career in 1987 at the FAO in Sudan, where he was based for 2 years. Before that, he was a volunteer for the Peace Corps in Tunisia and with the USDA, APHIS, and also in Phoenix, Arizona. He graduated in 1981 in Oregon with an MA in Phytosanitary Studies from California. It's a great pleasure to welcome you with us, Mr. Cressman, to be able to make this presentation. And pardon me for not having the CV at hand. So you have the floor, Mr. Cressman.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to just spend the next few minutes explaining to you about a different early warning system in a different part of the world. And so this is an early warning system that addresses the desert locust in Africa and Asia. So fortunately in South America, you don't have the desert locust, you have some of its cousins, which aren't quite so dangerous, but we have the most dangerous of the migratory pests called the desert locust. And this desert locust, it can infest up to 20% of the Earth's land surface. So essentially spreading from West Africa to India and from Tanzania in East Africa north to Southern Europe. So this is a very big area, and it's mainly the desert. Now, a desert locust lives for about 3 months. And within that period, it can increase about 20-fold, about 20 times. And this is an exponential increase. So that means after 1 year, there's more than 160,000 times the number of locusts than what was started with. So a very short life cycle and a very a high increase of locust numbers. And this is one of the reasons why this particular species of locust changes its behavior and its appearance. So normally in low numbers, it is a solitary individual insect surviving in the desert. But when they are in high numbers, then they become gregarious and they start to behave as part of a group, and they form these very large swarms that can be like clouds in the sky that block out the sunlight. And I'm sure you've all heard about these. Hopefully you've not experienced them. But why does this happen? It's basically in response to rainfall. So very exceptional, good, severe rainfall events like cyclones, like floods, that can bring large amounts of water to normally very dry areas. So once those floods...
Perdón, necesito interrumpir un momento. Para el doctor Cressman, si por favor puede seleccionar el idioma.
Mr. Cressman, would you please choose the English channel before you continue? If you go to the bottom of the screen where it says interpretation, you have to select a channel.
Okay, just a minute, please. Okay. Yeah, let me stop and I'll come out to this. Yeah. Okay, it says English, yes. Is that okay?
If you selected English, that's fine.
Yeah, I did.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, let me just reset up my thing here, sorry. Sorry, I have to share my screen again. Share screen, yes, okay. Apologies for that. Okay, I think we're back to the rain, huh? If we didn't lose the story here. So essentially, this large increase of locust numbers and the ability to form swarms is a result of very unusual rainfall that can occur in the desert. When this happens, locust swarms form. And a swarm can contain up to about 80 million desert locusts in a single square kilometer. And remember that swarms, they can be as big as tens or hundreds of square kilometers. So huge numbers of insects. And locusts fly during the day. They can fly up to about 150 kilometers per day over the land or over the sea. Now, in addition to that, just imagine, let's say a swarm the size of Montevideo. And I think some of you are quite familiar with that beautiful city. That swarm, in one day, that would be the size of that city, could eat the same amount of food as everybody living in Uruguay. So the potential, for disruption of people's livelihoods and threats to food security by desert locust swarms is absolutely enormous. The size of a swarm of Montevideo in one day eats the same amount of food as everybody in the entire country. I mean, that is absolutely phenomenal. Now, some of you may have heard recently that we are facing the worst desert locust situation that in a number of decades. And this has started because of two cyclones a couple of years ago in 2018 that brought heavy rains to Arabia. And thereafter, swarms formed from the breeding and they spread throughout Arabia, Southwest Asia, and into East Africa. That spread continued in the Horn of Africa because of another cyclone. It also continued in Southwest Asia as a result of good rains. Fortunately, the northern part of that upsurge in India and in Pakistan was contained by very good survey and control operations. But unfortunately, as we speak now, the upsurge is still continuing in the Horn of Africa, countries like Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya. This is what it looks like from the air and from the ground. So this is a swarm you can see, and this is in southern Ethiopia. It's that entire pink area of several tens of square kilometers. This is in Somalia from the ground. You can see what the swarm looks like. In Kenya, you know, in the national parks with the zebras. Swarms have affected communities. They've blocked transportation routes in some of these countries. And in the past year, more and more of these swarms have been visible in the sky nearly every day in some of these countries. So what happens when the situation becomes out of control like this? Well, essentially, hundreds of ground teams must be mobilized to find the locusts and to treat them with chemical pesticides or biopesticides. In addition, we have to bring in aircraft. At the moment, there's more than 28 aircraft operating in the Horn of Africa to spray desert locust swarms early in the morning before they migrate. But, you know, wait a minute. We want to avoid this situation. We don't want to reach emergencies like this. And so as a way to stop these emergencies from happening in the beginning, we operate the world's oldest early warning system. So here it's prevention is the key strategy to avoid emergencies. And this early warning system, it gives alerts, it gives forecasts to the countries so that action can be taken quickly before the situation gets out of control. So how does the system look like? Well, like most early warning systems, it relies on a number of different components. There's a geospatial component, so geography. So here you can see the area that we're interested in, Africa and Southwest Asia. In addition, it relies on data from the field, and it relies on tools to collect that data, digital tools, but also digital tools to analyze the data. So it's not only field data, but it's also satellite data and data using models, as we heard from the previous speaker. So all of this data then is turned into outputs, into information that can be used by decision makers. So let me try to explain some of the basic components of our early warning system. So first, it relies on data, as I mentioned. That data then is analyzed geospatially using a geographical information system. It adds value and it provides information then for action. So this is a typical desert locust habitat, and you can see it's very huge, very vast. And in this habitat, there are teams that are out in the desert, in vehicles, looking for green vegetation and looking for locusts. And they use digital tools to help record their observations in the middle of nowhere, observations about the environment, about the soil, about the vegetation, about the locusts. And those observations are transmitted in real time via satellite, or if there's internet connection by internet, to their National Locust Center, where the decisions are made for further survey and for control operations. And this is within the ministries of agriculture. So this is not really farmers. These are specialized teams. However, some of these tools can be used by communities and farmers if the locusts are, happen to be in those areas. In addition, the teams are using drones. So as you saw in the first picture there, a Land Rover in a very large desert can cover a very small area, but a drone can cover a much larger area. So here you can see there's a drone that the team carries that they can launch, and that drone can cover about 100 kilometers, looking and mapping green vegetation and then finding the locusts in that area. So a very, very good tool so each survey team can cover a much larger area. Now, the information that those teams collect using their digital tools, what we call eLocust 3, that is passed via satellite or via the internet through cloud platforms to a national geographical information system in each country. And here we have about 35 countries that use the same GIS. So all of the tools used to collect the information and all of the GISs are standardized. They use the same tools, the same database. So this helps to share the information, and also it helps for us to train the countries. It makes it much easier. From the countries, then the data flows to FAO headquarters in Rome, to my office where I'm based. And there I have the global, the global picture of the situation. So this is what the network looks like. So you can see all of the countries that are involved. We have frontline countries, countries that face desert locusts every year. And then we have secondary and invasion countries that face locusts once in a while. All of that data flows from the field to their capital city using those digital tools. And then it's analyzed in their own geographical information systems, the Ramses system, and then also connected to my office in Rome. Now, I mentioned, of course, there's satellites. So we use satellites as well to help fill in the gaps of the data. And you heard the previous speaker say that there's not enough, weather stations. So we use satellites to help us know where it's rained in the desert, where the soil is moist for egg laying, and where the vegetation is green for locust survival and also for shelter. So here's our inputs. So these are the field data, the tools that are used. In addition, when we have aerial control operations, we have another system that manages all those aerial operations for survey and control. That is supplemented by the Earth observations inputs from the satellites for the rainfall, the vegetation, and the soil moisture, as well as climate predictions. So I use climate predictions up to 6 months in advance, looking at anomalies of precipitation and temperature, and looking at rainfall forecasts for the next few weeks and the next few months. In addition to that, we use models. So as you heard before, we use an egg and hopper development model. This is based on temperature to estimate how long it takes the eggs to hatch and how long for the locust hoppers to become adults. In addition, I use two models to estimate the migration of swarms. So one is a trajectory model, so that moves the swarms forward or backward in time from point A to point B. And a dispersal model, which starts locusts at a single point, and then in the next week, it scatters them in the direction of the wind flow. So these help us to predict where those swarms might migrate to. So all of these inputs, the field data, the satellite information, the models, they are collated and collected in a GIS system. So here is an example of the swarms GIS system that I use that is showing you all of this data. So we use this system for the analyzing, and from the analysis of the current situation, then I can make the predictions on the scale and the location and the timing of the locust breeding and the migration. So we also are now developing an online version of our GIS to let's say, take advantage of the other data that is available online, so it can be easily integrated from different sources in real time or near real time. But it's fine to use these tools, to collect the data, to use the GIS to analyze all of that information, all of the satellite data. But we have to turn that into information that has value, that can be used by decision makers. So this is an example of the types of information that I produce, and it's different information. So in the middle, you can see it's a monthly bulletin that is produced indicating the situation in every country and the forecast for the next 6 weeks, country by country. So it's about 10 pages long. You can see the bulletin has a map on the first page, has a very simple paragraph for people to read. And then it has 3 different boxes here on the left side. These are the 3 different regions that we cover in Africa and Asia. And you can see there's some colors. And here on the right-hand side, you can see the scale of these colors. So when it's green, that means the situation is calm. So you can see in the bulletin here, just, you know, in 2 out of the 3 regions, the situation is calm. While in 1 region, the situation is serious. You can see in general, because of the heading of the bulletin, it's serious because of the color. So, you know, we've produced this bulletin in a way that it can be easily absorbed and digested by a very wide and broad audience. So sometimes we have presidents or ministers or high-level officials reading the bulletin. You know they don't read. They will just have a very quick glance. So if they don't want to read anything, they simply can look at the color of the bulletin or look at the map. You'll have technical people or researchers that want to have very detailed information. So you will find that later in the bulletin in the more detailed sections. So it's not enough to provide value added information, but you have to present it in a way that people can easily digest it and absorb it and use it. If you can't do that, then your information is not very valuable. All of our information is placed on our Locust Watch website. You can see the address here, and it's regularly updated. So on the left-hand side, you can see one of the recent updates. It's just a very short page of information in the countries and the regions, usually with a map and a photo. In addition, of course, we produce a number of different maps from our GIS system for the internet, for meetings, for briefings, and for other reasons. Now, that's not enough. We always want to do better with our system. So one of the ways we're trying to do that since last year is all of that data that is collected, you know, using those digital tools that you saw, the tablet, the GPS, the mobile app. All of that data eventually, within about a day or 2, arrives on the internet in a place called the Locust Hub, so that raw field data is available for people to use themselves in any way they want. This is open access, so people can use this for research to put into their models. They can download the data and analyze it themselves in their own GIS information. So this is the FAO Esri Locust Hub where you can find that information. So this is then, in my last slide, just an overview of everything that I've presented to you to try to show you how it all fits together. So here on the left-hand side, we have the field tools. So those on the ground, the digital tools, the tool used to manage our aerial operations, and then of course the drones overhead. In addition, up in space, we use the satellites to help monitor the rainfall, the green vegetation, the soil moisture, and we use models to help predict the development of the locusts and the directions of the migrations of those locusts. So all of the satellite, the models, and the field data is centralized in a GIS system for managing that data and analyzing it. From that analysis, then we produce the value-added products for decision making, and we make all of that information available on the internet. So this early warning system, while it is the world's oldest early warning system for any migratory pest, it's more than 70 years old. So it started with the establishment of FAO. Just because it's the oldest system doesn't mean that it's old-fashioned. We are constantly innovating. We're using the latest cutting-edge technologies. Artificial intelligence, for example, is part of the mobile app. The latest satellite data, the most highest resolution, new models, and of course, the latest functions in the GIS. So I think it's a good example of a very successful early warning system that covers the world's most dangerous migratory pests in some of the most difficult areas on this planet. So I'm very pleased to present this to you. And if you have any further questions, even after the Q&A, you can always contact me here. So thank you very much.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cressman. It was truly interesting, especially given the focus that you can have the best model, but if you don't have the latest information, well, and the right people, it doesn't make sense or it won't work. So we will now move on to the next speakers. Mexico, Senasica's participants. And I'm going to present each of the Senasica participants, and they're going to all be speakers. First, Jaime Diaz Lopez. He studied at the Autonomous University of Chapingo, agricultural parasitology in 2012. He has a diploma in epidemiology from the postgraduate College of Montecillo in the state of Mexico, Texaco, state of Mexico. He worked at the National Health Service, Food Safety and Agricultural Quality, Senasica. He's been there since 2013, in charge of regional coordination of phytosanitary epidemiological surveillance and regulations. He is the coordinator of phytosanitary information analysis from the systematization and sanitary analysis division, and he works closely with Dr. Juan Angel Quijano's team. He was a speaker for our first session. So, Juan Manuel Perez Uriel, he is an actuary, a graduate of the Marist University in Mexico. He's an internal auditor in ISO 9001-2015, standard by the Mexican Institute of Standardization Certification. He's a professor and a coordinator at the National Polytechnic Institute, and he's been on the faculty since 2009. He's an expert in statistics, management, and auditing, and he is an analyst at Senasica's Systematization and Sanitary Analysis Department, and is responsible for implementing methodologies to quantify the economic impact of sanitary issues and data systematization and transforming the data into strategic information. He works closely with Dr. Juan Angel Quijano's team in the Senasica Phytosanitary Alert System or warning system. Then Alejandra Franco Corona is a geographer. She's a graduate from the National Autonomous University of Mexico with an MA in environmental geography from that university. She's been a research assistant for various projects from the Institute of Geography at UNAM, which is Mexico's national university, and the Glaciology, Nivology, and Environmental Sciences Institute in Argentina. She was a professor or an TA during her training. She's currently a climatology meteorology analyst at Senasica, and she works she endeavors to create maps, geospatial analysis models, and on strategic sanitary analyses. And she also works with Dr. Juan Angel Quijano's team in consolidating Senasica's phytosanitary warning system. So you have the floor.
¿Me confirman si ven la pantalla de favor?
Please just let me know that you can see my screen. Yes, we do. Thank you. Before we begin the presentation, we'd like to thank everyone for this invitation. It's a true pleasure for us to come and share what we are doing here in Mexico in our national agri-food service for quality and food safety as well, in cooperation with our Institute for Agricultural and Livestock Activities, always looking to benefit our producers. We're talking about our phytosanitary warning system to reinforce our sanitary and health intelligence for the defense barriers we're trying to implement all over our country. The same kind of vigilance and surveillance that we have to do in all the different phytosanitary and plant health related activities in our country. This early warning system is one component that helps us define strategies to ensure we can have the highest level of cooperation, response, and participation to prevent and manage risks. Without anything further, let's look at how our early warning system works in Mexico. In this slide, we can see that our system at IICA is consolidated to ensure we cover all the needs for the crops that we consider basic and strategic. This is also under our Ministry of Agriculture, the Secretariat of Agriculture and Rural Development. In that sense, IICA and INIFAP consolidated a joint warning system. As Dr. Chrisman said, it is also guided and following international principles. We've adopted methodologies from FAO and IICA. As part of its objectives, the system wants to create and contribute with information on phytosanitary risks to avoid potential economic impact to our productive sector. In the end, our agriculture and productive sector is our first line of defense. There are eyes on the field to ensure we can mitigate or prevent any risks. As such, this warning system is thought to protect and cover all the crops, as I said, that are considered basic and strategic. At the forefront, we have corn, then we have beans, black beans, wheat, rice, chia, amaranth, sugarcane, and coffee. These are the first crops that have been added to our warning system so that we can focus on our main crops with our small, large, and medium-sized producers. Part of the structure of our system, it follows three large elements or three pillars. First, our sources and information bases. These are analyzed following the epidemiological triangle system. This means that every bit of information, all the data that we are gathering from different official sources is analyzed looking at the biological parameters of the pest, the phenological parameters of the host crop, and climate variables that can have an influence in how the pest develops. And also, based on the information collected on the field, it is analyzed to ensure that we can insert it into our warning system as it exists today. With all this information that is being processed and analyzed, there are tools that help us provide spatial modeling, geographic information systems, and simulation windows. They all come together to create a warning message. So with this strategy that we have defined for all the country, it can be communicated and managed so that the warning can help us reach our target, which is the producers. Here we see how our approach works and how it is applied. It has gone through a well-defined process to ensure we have the best flow There's the technical information provided by the advisors we have throughout the country who record specific information. This can be start dates for sowing a certain crop, the phenology of the crop, and the biology of the pest. These are base elements that can be integrated into our system. At a second point, we have our Office for Central and Federal Coordination that does the different analyses. And this all, of course, has a scientific basis and it's supported by evidence. We have consolidated the system because we have another institution in FAP that is collaborating in this system. That's where we work with Dr. Juan Angel Quijano Carranza, the panelist we had for the second session of this cycle. And so that scientific support has helped us validate the messages that are being created in the system. The third part is the operational coordination. And this is a very important step, as this is where they validate messages on site, on the field. And it's also the part that is responsible for communicating warning systems in a newsletter or bulletin. And finally, the last step of the process, after we have created the bulletins, they are communicated first to the technical staff distributed over 72 departments in Mexico through emails and others. And they themselves support us to then bring the information to decision makers. In our process, the decision makers, mainly our defense line at the field, are producers. And then our process continues with constant feedback to ensure we have improvements. So this shows the flow of our warning system today. On this slide, we summarize what Dr. Juan Angel shared in the second panel. And we'd like to highlight here the fact that the warning system, as my colleagues will also state, can be summarized under three principles. First, the study of pest risks using historical data. This has helped us create probabilistic scenarios to see how the pest might behave. The second component is progress in sowing and planting dates. So we're closing right now our winter season. We have two modalities, spring and summer, fall and winter. So we are working under the fall-winter cycle at this point. And the component on the dates for planting has also helped us enhance our warning system because we can link the different susceptible stages where there could be an attack on the field according to the different pests. And lastly, and very essentially, the very core of the system, the dynamic simulation models, where you have the biological cycle of the pest converge with the phenological development of the crop and weather conditions that are being analyzed under the principle of the epidemiological triangle I showed to determine the levels of alerts. That helps us estimate fluctuation of pest populations that are observed on the field. And with that, establish biological windows to prevent certain damages to crops. So that is the main basis of our system today. As part of the end process, once we have already created the warnings The messages are added in a bulletin or newsletter. The main focus is a preventive approach. So we bring together the information to communicate to producers so that we can achieve our objective, which is avoid the pest from completing its first generation or truly establish itself in the crop. So we are working under that principle. Our warning newsletters are sent out and updated weekly. We will soon hear from our colleagues how and why we update them weekly. And these messages, as I said, are communicated thanks to our technical strength on the fields. The graph to the right shows that of the 32 federative entities that make up the territory of Mexico, we have staff for technical support to all our producers in all regions. They work daily with producers, and once they are aware of a warning message, they're the ones that help us ensure that producers hear the message. That's how the system works right now. However, at IICA, we have already concentrated all the information in a single dashboard. Juan Manuel Perez, my colleague, will be sharing how that works in the different components of the dashboard, as well as the use you could make of this tool. Go ahead, Juan. Thank you very much. And hello to everyone. It's a pleasure for me to share our dynamic dashboard. This dashboard is a consolidation of our cooperation with our Institute for Agricultural Forestry Protection, IICA, and a part of the Ministry of Agriculture. The idea is for this to work as a tool that can help us visualize and host all our warning messages and to be provided for all producers throughout Mexico, as well as to upper management at IICA to help us make better decisions related to plant health. Our dashboard has 4 sections. First, if we click there, the operational strategy shows us the strategic documents, the updated documents of strategic importance for our priority crops. You can visualize them in PDF format. If we were to click on one of the documents, we can see it in PDF format. So once we have opened it, we can see the different components each document has. If we go back to the main page, the home page of the dashboard, we can look at different years, 2021 or 2020. The next section is phytosanitary monitoring points, the second section. And here, we see the different geo-referenced distribution points, number of pests surveilled, permanent observation points, observations, number of detections, and this is also related to each explored surface, sample surface, crop. So this looks for the information. The Ministry of Agriculture, for example, has much information by state or municipality, and it tries to provide as much data as possible. You can filter the information by state, municipality, or type of operation. There's another approach. If you go to the arrow at the upper right, we can see the population dynamics of the pest. This is related to the epidemiological triangle, and the idea is to verify current behavior of the pest. And this is provided by our technical staff. So if we were to click on one of the states that we can see, if we go here to one state, the whole dashboard changes specifically for this state, looking at the density of the population, the pest, or also according to each of the phenological stages. So the idea is to transform data into information with this. If we go back to the home page, again here we have another section, which are our bulletins. And so if we go there, we see the early warning messages that are visualized intuitively. At the first step, we see these graphs to see how many bulletins and coverage we have for each. We can look at an example. Let's go to the first one, the bollworm moth or armyworm. And for this one, we can see it's very simple and intuitive as we've classified it so that it can be user-friendly for producers to see the state they wish to follow, to see coverage for these bulletins. And if we want to click on a specific bulletin, we can also click on the page itself, on the cover, so that we access each of the components of the bulletin. We will soon hear from Ms. Alejandra, who will share each of the sections of our bulletin so you understand how they are divided. Going back to the home page, once we have located the bulletins, now we go to the current situation of the pest. This is a way to reflect the current behavior of the pest. This is information that is reflected from the field by our technical staff. It's used to refer to our messages as they are included in our bulletins. If we go and look at the armyworm one, if we click again there, we can project, just as we did under the bulletins, different filters per year, month, and week to see how it is progressing. And just like the one before, if we click again on the front page, we can access the full document. Lastly, again, going back to the home page, again, we see the different sections. The dashboard is continuously improving so that it can provide information for our producers, technicians, and upper management and high levels to make their decisions. With that, I give the floor to Alejandra.
Hola, buenas tardes. A continuación les voy
Good afternoon. I will explain some of the results of what we've heard from our colleagues. In this case, let's look at a bulletin of a specific pest, in this case, armyworm, for the cycle of fall-winter, and specifically an example from the state of Jalisco. So here I would choose the filter Jalisco. And so when you click on the front page of that state, you access the PDF of our bulletin. So the first page of our bulletins are the front page that allude to the state and the pest. At the top, you also find the number of the bulletin, as well as the month and year. This is just representative. And if we go to the second page of our bulletins, this is where we see the different elements that are results of our geospatial analyses. So page 2 at the top So the page number 2 at the top gives you the date of the week that is referenced. Our bulletins are valid for 7 days, from Monday to Sunday. So here we see in the first section of the page the information for the weather forecast in the coming 7 days. In this case, it gives us minimum and maximum temperatures for the state we are analyzing. Section 2 gives us a map model with different levels of alert that are looking at phytosanitary risks. This model is a result of geospatial analysis to see how the pest is developing. These warnings, high, medium, low, are based on our dynamic simulation models. These models have information on the biological cycle of the pest, the phenological development of the crop, and weather conditions. So this can help us see what the biological window is to apply measures to avoid any harm to the crops. To the right, section 3 gives us information on the number of municipalities that are at high level risk. This is because they have a large presence of the crop and it's in a susceptible phase. These models give us fluctuation of populations, and they give us a certain window where we can apply and prevent damages. So areas where there's not enough conditions for that biological window to start are low risk. Once the window starts opening, it can go to medium and high risk when the biological window is at the end of its prevention. And at the bottom, section 4, we have information on the economic impact of the crop. We consider the number of hectares that have the crop in the municipalities referred to and where there would be a greatest impact if the pest could continue its development or complete it. Here we have information provided by official institutions in Mexico. In this case, the Service of Agri-Food and Fish System. And it gives us estimates of 2019. The third page of our bulletin shows us a graph of growing stages for the crop that we are analyzing and for the state. The graph tells us how many hectares have that crop in the state. That's information on page 3.
Okay, en esta misma página, en la parte inferior.
Also on page 3 and in section 6, there's a series of recommendations with other offices at IICA and the NIFAP, our team with Dr. Juan Ángel Quijano, work on these recommendations and provide them for the technical staff. This message is then communicated to producers. And the last page of the bulletin, page 4, gives us another map showing only the municipalities that are at high risk at that time. So those that are high risk, and then under the map, there's also a table with the name of the municipality, the code, so that it can be identified in the map model, and the hectares that might be at risk. So that's how we create our phytosanitary bulletins with warnings. Issuance of these starts on Mondays, so that at the latest by Tuesday noon, they are communicated by email to our technical staff on the field. As I said, these bulletins are valid for 7 days. These are forecast data from our weather forecast that also has 7-day forecasts. Our newsletters and bulletins can be downloaded in PDF format. Anyone with the link of the dashboard can download them at noon on Tuesday. And the main objective at IICA is to provide information to understand how we can avoid invasion, development, and reproduction of pests that are being controlled in Mexico. This bulletin gives us elements to see how and when to act to ensure we don't have a first generation of the pest. And in that sense, we also want to have notification and reports, timely reports from the field for our agricultural sector in Mexico to ensure we can minimize impact of any pests in our strategic crops. And as Dr. Keith was saying, a model is just as good or is not as effective if it doesn't reach everyone we need it to reach, in our case, our national producers. I'd like to thank IICA and my colleagues, and we continue and expect your questions at the end.
Muy bien, muchas gracias.
Very well, thank you. The work that you've done and is exhaustive and very impressive, just to make sure that the information lasts through time and that people can find it useful. Imagine making this not timely enough and people losing the information or not being able to access updated information. So excellent work. So we're moving on to the last speaker now of the day. And we will hear Hector Emilio Medina. He's an agricultural engineer from the graduate of the University of Buenos Aires. He's an analyst and he's a plant protection expert, and he works at Senasa in Argentina. He has a master's in plant health protection, and he's about to defend his thesis. He has a diploma in geomatics applied to agriculture. Since 2015, he has been head of the National Locusts and Grasshopper Program in Argentina, and he leads the response to the South American locust pest affecting the region. Since 2017, he has coordinated the South American locust management plan among Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina, and he is the Inter-American coordinator for the Group on Plant Health, GICSV. So he also in July 2022, he is on a committee in the FAO and a locust response program for the PPO as an expert for Latin America and the Caribbean. It's a great pleasure and to welcome my fellow countryman, Hector Medina. So you have the floor. And once this session ends, we will move on to our Q&A session. Thank you. Thank you, Alberto, for introducing me. I was saying while you were introducing me, I can't believe I've done all those things. Wow. I don't even think I have any time to exist. But, well, it's a great honor. I'm very passionate about this topic, and it's wonderful to be here. Well, Argentina has developed an early warning system that it's not called a SAT or EWS system. It's more of a alert. And unfortunately, it's not a forecasting tool, but a warning tool. So I would like to just, well, complement some of the information that has been mentioned today. So I would like to just give you an introduction, just to provide some background about locusts in Argentina and how this pest is significant in South America and our risk management program. So for some time now, we have been working on our early warning system, which has been growing. And I'm going to also speak about the present and the future of this system. Keith spoke about the most important locust, the desert locust in the world. But we have a cousin that is a cousin of that desert locust. And we can see that this is the Inter-American, the IPPO, all the RPFs. As you can see on the map, they show the different locusts affecting our region. We have our Central American locusts as well. We work together with them. There's also locust in Peru that is devastating, and the most important for us has been the South American locust that covers various countries in the southern cone. So we can see a swarm of locusts here in Argentina in the past few years, not only Argentina, but many other countries, as Keith mentioned. We're speaking here about a cloud of millions of insects in the sky. And when Keith said millions, they really darken the sky. It looks like at 5 p.m. that it's evening or that it's nighttime. So this is the insect of focus. Well, some taxonomy, so you can identify it here where it's an adult between 5 and 6 centimeters. So what happened with the locusts in South America and Argentina? Well, it was the most significant pest in Argentina up until 1950. So what happened during a recession period, during 60 years, with a new resurgence, well, up to 2015? So what do they have, locusts and grasshoppers, that are so hard to control? It's the peaks. They're cyclical pests. You may have a significant outbreak, and then for 50, 60 years, as happened in our region, you won't have to deal with it. So it's such a challenge, truly, to deal with them. I'm not going to go into much detail, but there's an important model that was developed in France, referred to as the vicious circle. It's a vicious anti-Bactrian circle, and the pest at some point disappears, given the right weather conditions. But climate is key, especially in lower locust population. So when the population dwindles, then that's important to realize that you have to continue to fight it. So when the locust comes back, because they always do, to have the right tools in place to address them quickly or to fight against them thoroughly. In 1950, the country experienced a recession in locusts. In 2015, it impacted Argentina, Bolivia, and Paraguay. And in 2020, it was very close to entering Brazil and Uruguay. So this map gives you an idea of the pest. We're speaking that historically, its natural habitat is 4 million square kilometers. Argentina is the most important country tied to the locust, let's say, with regards to its attack. But many other countries are being impacted as well. Why is it so important? We're speaking here that it's a species that's polyphagous. It's not focused on a specific crop, but any crop can be impacted by it. It's a voracious pest and has a large migratory capacity, and it's a transboundary pest. We've measured in the past winter that a year back, movements of 150 kilometers in a day, 140 kilometers in a day. So one day this pest is in Argentina, then it's in Paraguay, then it's in Bolivia. So the response you have to have is truly aggressive, truly quick, and communication has to flow to be able to detect the swarm quickly and convey it to other regions. So populations, mentioned Keith, they grow exponentially. And he also stated that the solitary and gregarious is a relevant factor for this pest, this capacity of being solitary and then form these huge swarms. These are more pictures of Argentina. As you can see here, this was a wheat crop. Everything looks brown, and you could think that it's soil, but no. These are swarms of locusts, and you could see some wheat that's left behind. They cause severe damage in a little bit of time. More of the same. You can think that it's land, it's ground. It's not. And what does it eat? Well, the FAO calculates that an adult locust consumes 2 grams per day if its weight is eaten in a day. And imagine in a swarm of a kilometer square, there could be 40 million insects. And they calculate that a swarm can eat the same as 35,000 people in a day. We calculated something like this similar in Argentina with livestock because it's so important to our country. And we calculate, always thinking about calculations. We're not speaking about calculations. It's not math, it's biology, but it just gives you an idea of the dimension of the problem. But a swarm of this size that I mentioned can consume the same as 2,000 cows do in a day. So Keith also mentioned the swarms that exist in Africa that can be the size of Montevideo, and they have been smaller in our region, 25, 70 kilometers squared. We've seen swarms of 50 square kilometers, pardon me. For those of you who are not aware, it's a fourth of the size of Buenos Aires. It's not as big as does occur in Africa and parts of Asia, pardon me. So to close my introduction and to just give you a bit more context, 2020 during 2020, IICA, which supports actions in Argentina to fight locusts, hired a consultant who carried out a study, and he said that the production at risk in Argentina is about $3.7 billion. That's the dimension of the problem. So this is the production at risk. It's huge, it's enormous. It covers areas of great production in our country, and this is the baseline. So he didn't include fruit or orchards or forage, nor did he address pasture or grazeland. But imagine, it's every other crop that we grow in Argentina, and that is the amount that this damage would cost us. So after this brief introduction, I just wanted to set the scenario for, or set the context for how our region deals with locusts. Well, on a positive note, I wanted to mention how we deal with this pest in Argentina. Preventive management is the key. You have to be a step ahead of locusts. And what we do is emphasize constant surveillance. And why? Well, it's a cyclical pest. So at some point in time, the population dwindles. At this point in time, it's important to continue to carry out surveillance in the event that the locust will have an early onset and we'll be ready for it. So we need constant surveillance to be able to conduct early detection. Preventive detection in Argentina has also addressed with the emergence as well as resurgence in southern areas of the continent, areas where the locusts haven't entered, because Brazil and Uruguay, for example. Preventive management also addresses emergencies in another manner. We focus on responding to crises, putting out fires, for example, to be able to reduce the impact that the pest can have. So we have a public-private intervention system. We work at a municipal and regional level with much investment from the private sector. So we have general guidelines for executing our national actions, and then we have a emergency or crisis committee. And there are other crises committees at a regional level as well. So they're under the umbrella of the livestock and agriculture system, SENASA, in Argentina. So it's highly adaptive. Remember, stakeholders are different. Locusts travel quickly, so we have to adapt the strategy to regional and national levels. We also work on governance. We held a workshop just a few months back with Global Locust Initiative in Arizona. We spoke about roles, contingency plans, and emergency preparedness, and how to establish strong points, weak points, to be able to uphold our governance system. So we had work groups, early detection systems, and the guidelines to adhere to. So these three items are all what SENASA has to adhere to uphold their early warning system at a regional and national level as well. So to end my more general presentation, in Argentina, we implemented a program that I'm going to explain. Well, we spoke about the fact that the locust is a solitary pest, but it has a phase, a polyphenism phase, so it can transform in phase that's tied to behavior and its color. And here you can see pictures of the desert locust and the South American locust. So this insect may be the same as the other, but they're undergoing different phases. Why am I mentioning this? Because for us, well, we also think that a traffic light is a good way of mentioning how dangerous the state is. So if the locust is in a solitary phase and you have constant surveillance, you don't have to do much more than carry out a control. If the populations are solitary, the populations are low. It's not a risk for production. So different factors tied to increase of density, then another phase it'll enter another phase, and then measures may change, maybe and they will move to a gregarious stage. That's the traffic light will turn red. So the different phases of the of locusts is color coded based on the traffic light. In 2017,
riesgo por invasión de langostas. ¿En qué marco? En lo que Argentina se denomina una red de organismos técnicos y científicos para la gestión del riesgo, ¿sí? ¿Qué es lo que es esto? Son una serie de organismos, ¿sí? Técnicos científicos que, nucleados por lo que lo es el Ministerio de Ciencia y Tecnología, brindan información ante distintas problemáticas. Entonces, hay una problemática que es de langostas y nosotros necesitamos información climática, satelital, de investigadores, y en ese protocolo lo que podemos obtener es
In that
información.
protocol, we have to do it directly. So our weather service provides satellite images and data on rainfall, relative humidity, humidity of the soil. All that information is taken and analyzed quickly and efficiently. We won't have to go out and look for the information. We already have it provided because of this. Just to show you some information that we collect from our state agency in Argentina, INTA gives us information on soil charts, use of the soil, agroclimatic information, our weather service providing rainfall data and others, wind forecasts to see how swarms might
Ministry of the
be.
Environment also, because they tend to state
They have to stop
national
in
parks and other
natural
areas
reserves.
where they tend to be CONAE. And we deal with ground temperatures, information that is important to analyze, to monitor the status of the pest. So we established a traffic light system, as I was explaining. But so constant surveillance is when it's green. What does SENASA do? It monitors out in the field and assesses the situation. So it's the green means that there aren't too many problems. So imagine if you are out in the field and monitoring and you see that the locust becomes to be gregarious and there's different foci, and the green light, or sorry, the yellow light is turned on. That means a more detailed analysis has to be done. And the population starts rising, and beforehand, as I mentioned, we try to control the situation. So we control the pest. Can we control the pest? Can we go back to the green stage? Yes, we can if we're at yellow. But if not, we'll activate procedure 3 if we can't contain the situation. So swarms begin to form and they start moving. They can't stop. So we automatically move on to procedure 3, the red light that I was explaining. So the swarms are formed and they start to move. So what happened in the last few years in Argentina? We haven't been able to activate the traffic light. We haven't been able to activate it to green or yellow because we're speaking about a migratory pest, transboundary pest. So we've had swarms from Bolivia and Paraguay. So immediately the third procedure is activated. We skip the green and yellow lights and go right to the red light. And then we start analyzing. We start analyzing the different stakeholders about the problem and then the possible movement of the pest. We start informing that the pest is at X place and will probably move to this next area, and the necessary measures will need to be made to control and contain this pest. So this protocol is very interesting because the program has all the information to analyze what's happening from a monitoring stance, but also based on other factors that lead to the development of the pest and cause it spreading. Okay, I hope that I wasn't speaking too fast. This is how we manage the pests in Argentina. This management protocol that we conduct to analyze the information. Well, let me just mention what the early warning or detection system is for locusts, and that is currently being developed. So what is our early warning system based on? It's about how to effectively analyze swarms that are advancing and letting farmers know about what is occurring. Because remember, I mentioned communication is key. And we started developing this program for that purpose. We wanted to find a quick and effective tool to inform farmers about what is happening out in the field. So we provide information to farmers, and farmers also provide feedback to us. This is an application called the SENASA warning system. It's a free mobile app. They take a picture of the emergency out in the field and they send it to us. It could be any pest. We receive it and analyze it. The picture is very important. We've experienced that farmers tend to get confused. After many years of dealing with this pest, you might consider that a grasshopper or a locust might be the same. Many times, farmers are not sure about the species they're encountering, so we ask for a picture for that purpose. So, as Keith mentioned, given the resources we have in the region and FAO's resources for dealing with desert locust, we developed a register system or a system to register a sort of database where our monitoring information, our surveillance information is input. And that way we process that information. So there's a mobile version of it. And you don't need an internet convention. You don't need an internet connection. You don't need anything fancy. You just go with your cell phone, with your tablet. You note the GPS points and just make a note of that. You also mention how the crops are doing, the state of the vegetation, and you upload the information, and that goes up to the cloud very quickly and is then analyzed. It helps us gain time. We out those in the field and we in the control center, and then we send the information to Rome. So the idea is to work with spreadsheets and is very complex. So the idea is to be as digital as possible, use this mobile app to be able to quickly upload what's being seen in the field and just put it directly up in the cloud. We are working with Bolivia and Paraguay. This is a common issue in our region. So it makes no sense for Argentina to do a great job if Paraguay doesn't do a great job, because we need everyone on board here. It's important to work jointly. And we also have a regional management plan, since this is a transboundary pest. And we have many projects to be able to transfer technology to the other two countries. And that way we can all speak the same language. Through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Argentina, we have carried out various workshops. And we work together with IICA as well, which always provides support in this effort to transfer technology and make sure that digital communication flows better. The digital communication has to flow, especially when the pest is on site. So in a tangible manner, what can we say that our national program does? Well, it receives, processes, and analyzes information, and then it makes decisions and publishes data. And this information is for researchers, for farmers, for many stakeholders. We know that information has to be open. Keith also mentioned that information must be available for all stakeholders to understand what's happening with the locust. The early warning system for locusts works with the different inputs that I mentioned. To the left, imagine when you see a swarm of locusts in a specific area, then there's someone out in the field following up the swarm. They upload the information. It goes to the cloud. And the early warning system will detect that information of the swarm and will match the information with the national farmer registration system. It's a database that SENASA houses and includes livestock producers as well as plant growers. And we know where the producers are in that region where the uploaded information is, and they will get an email. The farmer will receive an email, or the producer, about mentioning what the situation is and giving them advice as to what they need to do. So just for you to give to have an idea as to the email that the farmer receives, here's a map. There's an M, you can't really see it, but it means M manga, it means swarm in Spanish. And here you can see a swarm. And we provide all of the necessary information about guidelines. We send manuals that we've previously prepared for the farmer to be able to take action if necessary. So this information is also received to other stakeholders, researchers, as I mentioned. Provincial, municipal, government leaders, they also receive the information because it's part of the information flow. So once the pest is detected, the information needs to flow continuously. So we inform the farmers or the producers once we detect a swarm. I'm going to give you a specific example as to where egg laying is taking place. If locusts, if eggs are detected in the next few days, we're going to mention that they're going to hatch, and that has to be informed. And then a essential role are the beekeepers. Remember, in Argentina, beekeeping is very important, and all efforts you can make to provide oversight for locusts may affect beekeepers. So that's why beekeepers are also part of this early warning system. And if the pest arrives close to the field, then they have to take the necessary measures because if it impacts its hive, the idea is for them to be as least impacted as possible. So just some examples of the manuals I mentioned that we provide and send farmers. So if they're informed that a swarm is close at hand, then they can see what to do, what to control this with, some general recommendations, and then how to correctly address this in a phytosanitary perspective. And if there's aerial control, these are recommendations. And this is the aerial pesticide application association, and we have with public and private stakeholders, and that's a picture that organization uploaded. There's also a guideline for recommendations for safeguarding of hives. If a person wants to conduct beekeeping protection steps, wants to take those types of steps against locusts, we have specific guidelines for beekeepers. The idea is also not to harm the bees. So FAO is a model to emulate It's our guidance with regards to how we conduct communication. And it's a similar map that Keith mentioned, the different areas in Argentina, the provinces. And everything I'm saying would really make no sense if the information would not reach the right individuals. And these maps and reports that we publish periodically all have an end objective. Just to also inform you that we have a continent level report, a hemisphere level report based with the GICSV, and IICA plays an important role with this, and the RPS of the region, where we've informed the hemisphere about the locust scenario, and following the same reports program that FAO has for Asia and Africa. And this is the stage for informing, the information stage. It's a early warning system about births, not only for locusts, but for other hopper species in Argentina. But what's the next step? Well, we're working on trying to automate these warning systems and to run different models that will allow us to automate that. So Dr. Kumper is from Argentina. He and David Hunter is from Australia, and we also have an expert from France, and they all have models which we want to validate. It's based on rain and how rain impacts the development of the pest, as Keith was saying. It's similar for our region, but it's not tied to cyclones because we do not have that. But it's key for developing locusts, for the development of locusts. Here's a movement of swarms, and Noah, we spoke about the direction of the swarms, where they're going to move. These are some pilots that we carried out with some experts, private experts, and they're all cited. If a swarm is in one area, where is it going to be tomorrow? And what's the objective? To inform the farmer, but the teams that are out in the field, they need to know what direction they should head to. We're speaking about very hard areas to access, so there many times aren't roads. So that is why these models have this objective. So it's more manual, and we need to automate it slowly. It's a model that France used, and you can see the color that's color coded and showing movement, how it moves forward in the swarms. And the message is this: there's a system that's working, and the objective is that it needs to be strengthened, especially towards the future. Just to close end to end, some thoughts. And I think this has to do with the whole panel, the early warning systems that we've all mentioned. You tend to think in a model. When you think of an early warning system, you think of a computer system, thinking that it's so easy to develop. And I was trying to explain in my presentation, well, rather quickly, that it's the whole process. It takes a lot of time to develop, and it's not something that is quickly, at the snap of a finger established. So there are definitely many items to look at. For example, training. You have to get the right training to address emergencies. Communication, we spoke about communication flow. All of the stakeholders that are involved in the program need to be able to understand the situation, the dimension of the contingency they're dealing with. Public and private partnerships, they need to become involved, all stakeholders. It's not only a government issue. And something that's very hard always to address is funding. Having the right funding mechanisms to respond to emergencies, that's always difficult to deal with. To always research, we need to support research efforts. So we need to be in close communication with academia, because we at SENASA do not research. Also, something that this panel, I think, is part of or an example of is to work together on a national and international level on different aspects, exchange information, best practices, technical transfer. That's very important to be able to develop a good early warning system for locusts. Thank you so much for your attention.
Muy bien, Héctor, muchísimas gracias, muy claro.
Thank you, Hector, very much. So now we have some time for questions. We have a very diverse audience hearing from Brazil, Bolivia, Nicaragua, Venezuela, Peru, Mexico, Belize, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Argentina, Uruguay. So hearing us from several different places, and we do have some questions. If I understand to whom it is addressed, I will clarify, and if not, I will just ask the question, and you can jump in and answer as you see fit. One question for Senasica. Could you show how you develop your technological models, your phenological models for crops and pests? Ale, you can help us with that? Yes. We didn't give the details, but our map models and those we referred to and the ones we include in our bulletins are a series of dynamic simulation models. So we use simulation tools with historical forecasts to feed data into the simulation windows. We consider the phenological development of the pest and the different thresholds, and this is taken with our geographic information systems where we update data every 2 weeks. So you can find every 2 weeks the map models that change over time for each of the bulletins. And for the weather forecasts, we obtain data every week, so they're valid for 7 days. And as we saw from Dr. Ruiz, we work with a geospatial analysis to support our maps. So these are general simulation windows with a phenological model in the crop cycle. I hope I answered.
Bueno, si se ha quedado con la duda, puede repreguntar. Bueno.
Yes, thank you. We have a question for Mr. Diaz Lopez. Could you define the necessary interaction between producers and state services to ensure we have an efficient system? Yes, as I was saying, in our National Service for Quality and Food Safety is a good point for how we've structured the official side throughout Mexico. So our technical operational officers are all on the field, and they're the ones that work with the state committees for plant health, as we call them here, and they work alongside our producers. And they have transfer processes for physical surveillance and monitoring. And when we want to scale the components for phytosanitary intelligence, they are our first line on the field with producers conveying the messages we create. And they also process and help provide the information in a more regional, understandable language so they can share the information with farmers. That's how we work during the communication strategy phase from Senasica to our producers on the fields. I hope that answered the question. But if not, I'm glad to help.
Bueno, ahora una
Thank
pregunta
you.
para
A question for Roberto Tapia. Where did you do the study that you presented?
Roberto.
Your
Hello.
mic is muted. Yes, go ahead. Now we hear you. And the phenological models that we showed in the presentation are taken from our system for warnings by the University of Chile under the team of Dr. Tomislav Kurkovic and Professor Morales as well. They have a multidisciplinary team there, and they have created models for Lobesia botrana, the ones I showed in the presentation. Of course, Lobesia botrana has a lot of information, 33,000 traps and several seasons. So that's a system that can help us calculate for each of the traps the cumulative temperatures, and so it's a model that has a lot of information. It's not the same for aeolians, which is a pest that does not have the same impact as Loesia botrana. And as for the systems, this is something we developed with the European community from 2008 to 2012 with a company that works with SAG, and that was a part on the national development side. Thank you. A question for Dr. Keith Cressman. What aspects or elements of an alert system or warning system do you think are important for warnings to be heard by producers?
I think, as I mentioned, it all probably depends on what producers want, what they need. So you have to meet their needs. And so it's a very bottom-up approach. So if you're starting to develop an early warning system, first, I think you need to go to the field, you need to go to the offices, you need to go to the agencies and see what they need. What are they missing? What would they like from you or that you can provide to them? Now, of course, sometimes they'll ask for impossible things, but that's normal. Huh? But still, I think that's the very first step. And I say that with some experience because I developed the fall armyworm monitoring and information system for Africa called FAMOUS. And that's the first thing we did. I spent probably a month or two in visiting African countries, visiting farmers, visiting extension agents, people who are going to use the system, and talked with them and said, right, what do you need? What do you want? Do you want to know a list of pesticides that can kill fall armyworm? Do you want to see a map of where they're present? Do you want information about their biology? Do you want to know when it's going to rain next week? Or, all of these things. Sometimes they might not know exactly what they want. So you have to help them a little bit, give them some ideas. But if you can do that successfully, then you'll have a really good early warning system. But it's not just that, because then you need people operating that early warning system. And it's again, the human component here. We're very much mesmerized by digital technology, all those fancy digital tools that I've shown you, that other people have shown you, GISs, models, satellites, all of these things. Yeah, they're good, but it's people who have to use them and people who have to benefit. And that's something we can't forget. We can streamline data, we can automate the procedures and these things, but still at the end of the day, we're dealing with farmers, we're dealing with extension agencies, we're dealing with producers, with growers organizations. And that's something, yeah, we can't forget. We always have to keep that in our mind. I hope that's given you some insight. Over to you.
Bien, muy bien. Otra pregunta para Senasica.
Thank you. Another question for Senasica.
Y Diaforina citri.
An alert system for HLV and Diaforina citri. Do you have one? And if so, how does it work? Going back to what we heard from Dr. Juan Angel, when the problem with HLV in Mexico was catastrophic. In all Mexico, we now live alongside the pest, and methodologies applied during the phytosanitary campaigns for each of the areas where we found problems related to HLV, they were all addressed through a phytosanitary campaign. Dr. Juan Angel also said that under that component, the phytosanitary campaign, we included integrated pest management to mitigate and minimize the risk of the spread and to try to contain it. Currently at IICA, we still have that campaign against HLV, and we continue with phytosanitary epidemiology, and in areas where that pest is not present, our staff on the field informs and reports so that we can act as quickly as possible. So that's as much as I can say for now.
Muy bien. Tenemos una pregunta para
Thank you. We have another question for Dr. Kressman. If you're using phenological locus models to support the model, or any spatial risk model that can help you create a product with different risk levels?
Yes, we're not using special risk models per se. Of course, we're using a phenological model just on estimating locus development, but that's very, very straightforward. It's just based on temperature, and temperature doesn't vary too much in the desert because we're mainly in warm areas. But when you talk about locus risk, though, especially desert locus, it's a multi-dimensional, multi-component issue. In fact, there's a lot that has to go into a risk model, and some of those elements we don't have a very good grasp on. We don't have very good knowledge about. And that's, saying that about the desert locust, which is probably the most studied locust species in the world. But still, there's some things that we don't quite know about it. The other difficulty, of course, is that with desert locusts, as with many other locusts, they are very much integrated with the weather, with the environment. And weather now is becoming increasingly more unpredictable, especially in the desert areas, much less in the temperate zones, but certainly in the arid and the hyper-arid areas. It's becoming very hard to predict, and the models are not doing a very good job. Both the sub-seasonal as well as the seasonal models, they're struggling with that. As I mentioned, in this upsurge that we've been now having to manage for the past couple of years, it was initiated by cyclones, and you're very lucky in South America, you don't have cyclones, but in the Indian Ocean, there are cyclones, and there's absolutely no warning, no predictions of cyclones. You're lucky if you know a cyclone is going to be developing 2 to 3 days in advance. Much like the hurricanes in North America, I suppose, they have a bit more warning there. But this is probably the main limiting factor to any type of a risk model that would be robust and reliable, is that it's still our current capacity to forecast cyclones is very, very minimal. And as that is the main driver of what it changes a calm situation, a solitarious locust situation, into an emergency, into a gregarious, into swarming situations. This is the main problem that we're facing. The other challenge that we're facing is using satellites to estimate soil moisture, because as you know, the soil needs to be moist for those eggs to be laid, and it's not just surface moisture. It's moisture down to about 10 or 12 centimeters below the surface. And we have two different products we're using now for the first time this year. And I must say they're both equally impossible to use. They produce very beautiful imagery, and you could be very convinced about it. But if you don't know those areas that you're trying to estimate in, you will be probably fooled a little bit. And if you do know those areas, of course, then you realize the limitations. So these are, I'm just trying to highlight, some of those elements that would go into a risk model that still, they provide estimates, but they're just not reliable or robust enough. So as we say, garbage in, garbage out. So, you can put these elements into a risk model, but you're going to end up with a model that's not very reliable. And then if you start to use that with decision makers, with growers, with communities, you're going to lose their trust, because then you're giving predictions that are not reliable. So we're very, very cautious, about that. I hope that answered some of the question. Thanks.
Bien. Muy interesante, verdaderamente.
Thank you. Very interesting, really. I think it was a great answer. Thank you. And we have a question now for Medina, Dr. Medina. In a process to look at a warning or notice, if we look at it as a chain, which is the weakest link? Thank you, Alberto. I have to apologize. I know that I spoke too quickly, so sorry about that, especially for interpreters, but in any case, to those who were translating. And as for the question, I think that goes along with something that Keith said in his previous answer. I don't think there's a stronger or weaker link. And maybe there is in some particular systems, but overall, it has to do with understanding what our end users need. And in this case, producers. What do producers want to know? What do they want to be informed about? Do they want to know if there's a swarm in Paraguay, although they're 1,000 kilometers away? Or do they want information 100 kilometers away? Or do they want to know if a population is growing near his field? And more importantly, how does the producer want to find out about this? We are using email now, but many producers don't. In Argentina and other parts of South America, most use a lot of WhatsApp. And so WhatsApp groups is something they like to use. That's how they want to get the information. Some might read emails, some don't even have an email, even in our registry, although that's mandatory. So it goes along with that. You have to go to the field, go and understand what the sector demands and needs, also local governments, what are they interested in knowing from us? If there's a weaker or stronger link, I think that can change. I don't think there's one that is always stronger or weaker, and it's not such a long chain in our case. But we need to understand what message do producers want to receive and how. Those are the two keys. Thank you. We have another question for Senasica. And it says, the information is shown on 3 pests, at least what you shared with us. Is it just 3 pests? Where we looked at the current situation of the pest, are there other pests in your dashboard?
Entiendo la pregunta.
Yes, I understand the question. The user is interested in knowing how many pests overall we include in our warning system at Senasica. To answer, in one of the slides, we saw the 9 strategic pillars prioritized according to our current administration. And so it goes with the different crops, corn, bean, and then up to coffee. There were 9 pillars there. The first stage, and for each pillar, just for corn, we are issuing warning messages for armyworm, cornworm, and for beans, the different pests that can affect beans. And because of the coordination we have and the technical cooperation, we worked on looking at the economic impact these could have. So we determined these regionally. So they're the kind of pests that we are following. But just for our presentation, we only showed the armyworm, as you saw it shown by Alejandra. And do you have anything on fruit flies? Our next step for this warning system is, and we've already progressed a bit on locusts too. So for that, we're looking at the FAO model and the OIRSA model, and also structuring an early warning system for fruit flies as well. And for that case, we work on operating a national emergency mechanism, as we have some temporary entries of fruit flies around Chiapas. But yes, we have that as a next step at IICA, and we do have more components that we will be including to enhance the early warning system and our phytosanitary intelligence. Thank you. Great. It seems we have no other questions through our chat boxes and in our channels over social media, but we do have time if one of the panelists would like to ask a question to others. Keith, what time is it in Rome?
It's 11:30 at night.
Es temprano. Es temprano.
It's early still.
Muy bien. ¿Alguno tiene alguna otra
Okay,
pregunta?
so do we have anyone else with a question? I'd like to just highlight something that Hector mentioned, where each country and each place is different. We all understand warnings differently too. So that's a very important step to understand what the warning means or how we want to use it, because we might have the best newsletter or bulletin, but many producers might not even read the email or read the PDF. They want something short and very concise, easily understood, and cell phones seem to be the closest to that at this point. I don't know how they work with that in Africa. I think it may move at a more government level, but that seems to be an option that we have to find the tool to use for each region. I might be wrong, but.
No, I think you're correct. I mean, obviously mobile technology is increasing everywhere. What we're finding in the case of Africa, it's not that it's a limitation of mobile phones, it's a limitation of the internet service. In the sense that the internet connectivity is either too slow or just not reliable enough. And as we're now relying more and more on internet to deliver our, to collect our data and to deliver the early warning outputs, it is becoming problematic. There's some countries in Africa that there is no internet, and so how do you have an early warning system, a regional early warning system, or a global early warning system for such a country that doesn't that cannot access the internet? So these are real challenges. We're sitting in Italy or in other countries that have very fast, very reliable internet connectivity. We're developing products, tools, digital tools, apps, GISs, early warning systems, but forgetting that people, do have a very often have a very slow internet connection. So we have to always, I think, bear that in mind. It comes back to what Hector was saying is, what do people want and how do they want to receive it? But also, how can they receive it is really important.
Bien, muy bien.
Very well.
Roberto, ¿querías comentar algo?
Did you want to add something, Roberto? If not, we'll close.
Como un poco cerrando lo
Well,
que se ha
it has to
conversado.
do with
El
closing
trabajo
the seminar.
fundamental, digamos,
Definitely
una línea de
all the
trabajo que
work done by the FAO, well, is definitely showing us how to do things. And IICA definitely has much experience in their efforts to curb locusts. It's very important to stay in touch with you
cuáles son sus avances y de qué
and
manera
to learn what headway has been made and how we can execute or implement your ideas in our region.
digamos, partimos en 2016 con el área de inteligencia,
We're
empezamos
taking baby steps. We started in 2016 working with IICA, and you've definitely shown us how to tread.
como conclusión de que en el fondo todos estos esfuerzos que
So just to
hacemos
conclude that at the end of the game, everything we do, develop early warning systems, automated systems, perhaps with much information from the field,
clara y
if they
fácil
don't have an easy way to get to producers, they're just not going to meet their end objective, which is to warn, to inform.
vía
It may be a text message or a website or whatever, an app. It has to be adapted to the requirements of the producers. Maybe get together with them in focus groups, carry out pilots before you roll it out, make necessary adjustments. That's essential.
2-3 años con pilotos con productores hasta que lo
Our
adecuamos.
system had to be tweaked for 2 to 3 years with the different producers before we rolled it out. Because there were many problems, things like, for example, pesticides, they're stolen. The systems just weren't working out in the field because of the lack of knowledge of our producers. So it required a learning curve. So thanks for setting such an example. Well, hopefully this will be of importance for the next generation. It's a continuous process of enhancement. Maybe something that was great 15 years ago isn't anymore. So given the fact that we definitely stayed within the agenda, we did not go over our allotted time. I'd like to thank Alejandra, Jaime, Juan Manuel, Keith, of course, Roberto and Hector for their excellent presentations. I'd like to thank you all for your invaluable time. I know you're busy individuals, and this will be recorded. I hope everyone can access these videos again and perhaps listen in on what they may have missed or if they need to. So thanks again. And we are meeting again next week. Sorry, next. It's has to do with spatial distribution of species for quaternary risk management. For quarantine pests, sorry. Quarantine pest risk management. So we will see you then. Spatial distribution of species for risk management in quarantine pests. So hopefully you can all take part in our next session. It's been wonderful to interpret for you, and it's been wonderful. Thank you.
Gracias, adiós. Muchas gracias, hasta luego.